Well, this is pretty late. So late that 2019 is over. So the 10th anniversary of MTWS is over. But I still have over half of this series still to go. So I'm still going to finish talking about it. And of course, I'm still going to have the 10th anniversary logo up here because this is part of the 10th anniversary. So I'm not going to stop talking about it. Now that I've finished with MTWS for the 2019 season, I could probably now finally finish up these episodes really quickly. So anyways, here is episode 6 of the history of MTWS. In the last episode, I talked about the 2011 season, and now it's time for me to talk about the 2012 season, the original season that was supposed to end MTWS. So, get your popcorn ready for a long-ass story. Now, before I talk about the 2012 season completely, there were some things I forgot to talk about in the 2011 video. There was one thing I wanted to talk about, but I can't remember, unfortunately. But one thing I did forget to mention, which I'm going to mention right now, was back in December 2011, during a Thursday night Browns at Steelers game, I made the very first logo of MTWS. And here it is. And I'm sure you could tell it is an inspiration by Monster Jam's logo, the gray triangle. Now, of course, I did a little bit of a twist, because at the time, remember, it was Advanced Auto Parts Monster Jam, where they had the Advanced Auto Parts logo at the top. Instead, I made a very terrible red bow, but that was MTWS's first ever logo, and that's what it would be until 2014, when I made the 5th anniversary logo, and of course, the 2015 logo replacing it. But now we're into November of 2011, and it was right here, this month of this year, when I decided that the 2012 season would be the last of MTWS at the time. Now, why was that? Well, it was pretty simple. I was growing up. I just turned 18, and of course it would be kind of crazy for me to do another season after this, especially since I'd be 19 and all. And of course, I had to take some responsibilities with my life. I'm sure you all know this feeling when you're finally an adult and all, like getting a job and all that. And throughout that fall of 2011, when I finally turned 18, I went looking for jobs and all, because I needed to. But of course, nothing happened. But I'm sure I was eventually going to get something. So I had to, unfortunately, end MTWS, because there would be no way, as much as I would want to, be able to run MTWS as a league and take care of live business as well. And I decided, unfortunately, as much as I hated it, I had to end MTWS. Now, like I said, it was crazy to maybe consider going for 2012, but I decided to go for it anyway. So yeah, growing up in life, needs and all, were the reason why the 2012 season was going to be the last MTWS season at first. But as we all know, that ended up not being the case 2 years later. It was now March 2012. Of course, it's been over a month since the 2011 season ended, with Power 4 being the new racing champion and Thunderbolt being the freestyle champ. And I decided I was going to, of course, make 7 new trucks to get MTWS at biggest point possible of 40 trucks. Now, of course, thinking back, I kind of wondered, why would I do that if I knew for a fact MTWS was going to end after this year? Why would I make all these brand new trucks for them just to compete in 1 year and that be it? But I decided to do it most likely because, well, I know it is actually the reason, because I wanted the league to get bigger, to have more trucks in it, so it would be more realistic, more fair for the 24 truck field for the championship, because 24 trucks in a 33 truck league make it to a championship over half? It just was not a fair amount. So I eventually did make those new trucks. And those new trucks were Topsy Turvy, Dark Beast, Hearts Ablazing, and Supercharger. Also, another new truck was Outrage, which was actually Patriot from 2009 to 2011 repainted into it, as Patriot got a new truck. And then 2 special trucks were made as well, and that was first Monster on Wheels, or Monster on Wheels, which is its Japanese pronunciation of it, as that was a Japanese themed truck. And then finally, very unique, was the MTWS truck. And it was actually a reference to Grinder in Monster Jam, because remember from 2010 to 2013, Grinder was the official truck of Monster Jam. I decided to make one for MTWS as well, but this time, the title sponsor, MTWS. And it replaced Wild Ride as the official truck of the league, which it still is to this day. And also for the 2012 season, since it was going to be the final season of MTWS, I decided to make it a very special year, and meaning too when it came to the schedule, as the theme of 2012 would be the road back home, or in other words, the road back to Baltimore for the 2012 championship. The site of the first MTWS event is going to end it. And I decided also to have the season opener be in New Orleans to replicate it, because remember, the last event beforehand was in New Orleans for the 2011 championship. It would begin there, and the season would end in Baltimore, where it all began for the 2012 championship. And of course, I also decided for the first time ever, MTWS was going to go for its first ever international event. Now, we did go to Canada back every year so far, and of course this year we would be the first time going to Mexico City, but this would be the first ever event outside of North America, and of course it would be in November when we went to the Tokyo Dome in Tokyo, in Japan, to show how far MTWS has gone by going across the Pacific and to the other side of the world. During the summer of 2012, I decided, of course, with the backflips becoming a big thing now in Monster Jam, I decided to once again try my luck and make backflips into MTWS. Of course, remember, in the 2011 season opener in Orlando, I tried to do it, but it did not work. But I didn't give up, and I eventually came up with something. I first made my own version of the backflip semi-trailer that was made and used in World Finals 12 and 13 at the time. Remember, with like a step up on both sides and then a semi-trailer on it. I took two step ups, put a semi-trailer in front of it, I lifted it up more to get the extra height, and of course I would add ramps from the other side of the step up on the other side. It's a crappy version, but hey, it was the best I could do at the time in 2012. And after months of work, I eventually found a perfect setup for a backflip at the time. In MTM2, for all of you who don't know, the obstacles by default, the models for the obstacles are set to default, which means if you hit them, they're like a brick wall. You can't do anything about them. You have to make them transparent to go through them, but of course if you do that, then you go through them. So how do you make the obstacles hittable? You add things called boxes, which are models with nothing there. They're hidden objects. And I shape them in a way so they become ramps. So that's how you get over them. But there's another thing called a ramp, which is a extremely advanced version of a box, which is like a ramp. And if you hit them, the truck will get a massive boost of speed and make a massive jump, basically. So what I did was, I made a ramp. I designed it in a way so it would be like a ramp going in front of the backflip semi-trailer. And you would have to crawl up to the ramp as slow as possible. And as soon as it grabs you, you have to go in reverse. And if you timed it right, you would get the backflip. It would be slow, but unfortunately, to make it worse, you can possibly go straight up and over it, so you would fail the backflip. Two, the other side, which would be a ramp, you can end up going for it and getting a massive, huge, unrealistic sky wheelie because the ramp would force you up in the air, which was unfortunate. But more importantly, when you went for the backflip, and if you successfully started rotating, that was it for your run. You were not going to get off of it unless you were going to keep rotating until the ramp either forced you up, over, or to the side of the ramp, which would be unrealistic and most likely flip over, ending your run right there. That's why for the next bunch of years when trucks went for the backflip, I ended the filming right then and there because it would have been too unrealistic and it would have kept going over and over and over again. It was a very shitty setup now looking back, but at the time, that's the best I could do. And that's why when it was finally done in MTWS, it was only done as the last move in the truck's run. It would be like the last move in bonus time, and if they did it, they would get an automatic 5 points if they were successful, because it was that hard to do. And speaking of bonus time, this was the first induction of bonus time into MTWS. And then in August of 2012 was a huge moment for MTWS history, as is when MTWS got its first official theme, as Tasmanian Devil Boy, a huge fan of MTWS, suggested "This Means War" by Nickelback. I heard it and I loved it, and that became the first and official theme of MTWS, and still to this day, almost 8 years later, it still remains the theme, and I have no plans on ever changing it. It's too linked to MTWS. It's like Bad to the Bone to Gravedigger and Dope Ride to Max D. It's too linked to ever change. So thank you, Tasmanian Devil Boy. I know you're still watching this. Thank you for your contribution to MTWS. After the successful test run of the rookie trucks where the backflip was successfully done, MTWS began its 2012 season down in the Superdome in New Orleans, where it last ended the 2011 season with a Hurricane Isaac, I think the name was, hitting the area at the same time, which was a funny reference. And to the surprise of everyone, qualifying ended with Power Ford, the new racing champion, screwing up in qualifying and ended up being last place in qualifying. But despite that, it would make it all the way to the semifinals, where it would fall short in it as it lost to Terra Voltage. And then on the other side of the bracket, Thunderbolt, the defending freestyle champion, ended up making it all the way to the finals, where the finals, in a funny, ironic twist, was Thunderbolt going up against Terra Voltage. Kind of, you know, the fact that it beat Turbo Blaze in the 2011 championship for the freestyle title. Now here it is going up against its teammate in the 2012 season opener finals. But in the end, it won it in that regard too. So then freestyle came along. Of course, it was the first freestyle with bonus time. All the trucks tried their best out there. There were some incredible freestyles. But there were a lot of trucks that tried to go for the backflip, but all of them failed. One after another after another. I was like, oh god, oh no, this is not good. I had such high expectation and hype for the first ever backflip, and this is going like this. No one's getting the backflip. Like, oh god, what did I do wrong for this to happen? But then Thunderbolt, the defending freestyle champion, came out and did just like it did back in February when it won its freestyle title. Ended up putting up a sick freestyle. And then to top it off, it made history. Thunderbolt, going for the backflip semi-trailer, went up and over, landed the backflip, and flipped inside of the semi-trailer, kind of like how El Toro Loco did in World Finals 13. And with that, Thunderbolt was the first truck ever to land the backflip as it doubled down in the season opener. And then, of course, we had a nice encore with Overdrive coming out of the truck I made just like a month or so earlier, where it actually knocked Thunderbolt off the track before it ended up stuck up there somewhat itself as well. I would not get that much rest, as just 5 days later, we would be down in Tampa for our next show, and this was the first time ever MTWS would do a quasi-live broadcast, not a live event though, but I would update the site telling everyone what's the progress going of the event instead of writing the recap and all after the event. Unfortunately, I was hoping that this event would actually be quicker and it would be quicker than normal. It ended up going on for 6 hours. It was much slower. And after that, I decided, nope, I am not going to try this again, and I ended it right there. And of course, it wouldn't be until the 2014 season with Twitter that I would come back and do something like this again. But Tampa itself was incredible. Had the Monster Razor beating Outlaw in the finals in a photo finish. We brought out a backflip wall, which Nitro, Shatter, Ye Plunderer went for it. Whole bunch of incredible moves. As we went into the fall of 2012, there were incredible highlights throughout the MTWS season, and of course, big ones were in Mexico City, where our first time there, Eruption ended up getting stuck inside the semi-trailer, and then in freestyle, power forward in an encore, I think it was too, came out and actually went for Eruption, who was stuck in the semi-trailer and ended up smashing hard into it, destroying Eruption, getting a wheel stuck in Eruption's frame, flipped around in midair and crashed on the other side, which was so cool. Then I think a week later, we went to Detroit in the last show in the Silver Dome, where in freestyle, I believe it was Crusher who got stuck in the back of another semi-trailer, just like back-to-back weeks. And a whole bunch of trucks ended up jumping over and all, which was really cool. And then you had Impala going for Crusher, which was crazy, and which was even more crazy, it got stuck inside the semi-trailer. It actually got stuck in there too, so we had 2 trucks in there. And then multiple more trucks ended up jumping up and over it. And then Shatter came out and surprised everyone by going for Crusher and Impala, smashing into him and jumped over him and getting an incredible freestyle for the win. And then, of course, in November, we went to Philadelphia, where we brought back the backflip wall, a new version of it, multiple angles to go for it. It was incredible, an incredible encore as well. Whole bunch of insanity in these free shows. And I also forgot to mention too, back in September 2012 was another live show, first time ever in Toronto, the first ever live overseas event outside of America. And it was a tough track, very tight St. Louis style, but it was incredible. And the incredible thing was, Thunder, meaning Nitro, would win racing here, and then would have an incredible encore where it ended up flipping in its encore, violently wrecking at the end, but it managed to come back for its freestyle. Unfortunately, it fell short, and in the end, it went out for another encore to make up for it. It ended up flipping 3 times total in that night. Unbelievable. And then in October, we went to Indianapolis for another live show, and oh my god, there were incredible highlights in that one. Crushing one winning racing, Mad Dog winning freestyle, which I believe was the first time I won freestyle in years, including going for Crazy, who was stuck inside the side of the race lane and went right for it. It was a beautiful freestyle, it did. But there was one tragedy in the event, was Endurance Racing topsy-turvy. Of course, the racing lanes were really close to the stadium model, and the model was not that big, so topsy-turvy ended up going wide and ended up landing into the stands and killed people. Yeah, I know it's fictional, but just go along with it, because it was being like more realistic at the time. So that was unfortunate, even though, of course, it was all fake and all. Now, of course, I was kind of a dick in the video because I was so angry about them, like censoring Captain's Curse years ago. They should still show the video regardless of what happens. So, yeah, I kind of maybe regret being that much of a dick, but they should not have censored Captain's Curse. That's just my point. But hey, at least this was all fiction. That's all that matters. November 11th, 2012, a historical moment in MTWS history. We went to Japan, to Tokyo, in the Tokyo Dome, for the first ever overseas event. Now, overseas events in MTWS meant non-North American events. Now, of course, if I went to Mexico City and Toronto or anywhere else outside of America, I probably would call them international events now. But at the time, at least, this was the first ever overseas event. And to commemorate this moment, I decided to make a whole unique racing setup, which would end up being called, affectionately today, because of the location, Tokyo Style. Now, how is Tokyo Style performed? First off, it starts like U-turn style. The truck then makes a turn, like goes into St. Louis. It goes over a little hill, but stops and then makes a turn over a hill in between the racing lanes. It then goes down the straightaway where it started, and I'm racing, made a turn. It would then go down the hill, down the straightaway, and then it would hit the same hill that hit earlier in the last pass at a different angle, so now it's back on the first lane it did beforehand. After that, it goes all the way down to the edge of the turn where there were 2 turns. It would go on the wire turn. It would then line up for a giant tabletop, hit at full throttle, and jumped over it where the finish line was. Now, this first version was so badly done. It was so badly done. Mainly because I made the obstacle, the track in mind with both racing and freestyle together, because remember, this was at the time where, like, unlike the World Finals at this time, everything was made with racing and freestyle in mind, whereas now I would make it racing on its own and then freestyle separately for a track like this. But I made it such a bad job. The vast majority of the trucks struggled on the track. I don't think there was a single, like, photo finish with the Tokyo style track when I first made it. That's how bad it was. But in the end, Wild Ride would get the win in a blowout, win its first ever racing event, which would not happen again until it won race in Baltimore this last summer. And this event had a shit ton of backflips too, and in the end, Power Forward and Outlaw would go on to win freestyle as well. And then we had a big encore to commemorate the event too. 7 trucks! It was a very special event, and that was so fun that week to make the event despite all the troubles with that track. After the incredible season, it was finally time for the season finale, the last at the time regular season event of MTWS, Anaheim. I think it was the first time too we were there, and it kind of sucked too, and how fitted it rained in the event, how fitted for the final event. Nitro in the rain would get the #1 qualifier. It would make it all the way to the finals, but it would get beaten by Eruption, preventing the sweep. But Nitro came out and showed why it almost won a freestyle title 2 years ago. It ended up winning freestyle with a 36, edging out the rookie MTWS and Power Forward at the time. And in the end, Crazy Bull would be the 2012 points champion. Four incredible months of MTWS action culminated with the final event of MTWS's history, at least in terms of regular season, and that was the 2012 championship in Baltimore. Now, this event had a new addition too as well, and that was the Runners-Up Cup. Now, of course, remember, in 2012, Monster Jam began a new thing in the World Finals called the Young Gun Shootout, which 8 rookies or something like that would drive in a racing event the night of qualifying, Double Down, before the World Finals. And I decided I was going to do that too. And this time it would be the Runners-Up Cup, where instead of it being rookies just racing, it's going to be all the 16 trucks that did not make it to the championship competing in one final event to see who among them was the better of the 16. And it would be held 1 week before the championship itself. And to celebrate the occasion, Crusher would get a new body as it got a repaint of Sobe instead of being the default Chevy body for MTM2, and it looked much better. And that body it still has to this day. In a field with a whole bunch of bad trucks, Blood Rage, who managed to not make it to the championship event, ended up getting the #1 qualifier to no one's surprise in the event, and would make it all the way to the finals, where it would go up against Crusher, who had that new body and all. It went down to the wire, and Blood Rage would end up winning the race by just 1/100th of a second over Crusher. Incredible race that was to clinch the 2012 Runners-Up Cup winner. And of course, it would be racing. It would be later on where I eventually add freestyle. And then after the event, we had qualifying for the 2012 championship itself. And Eruption would get the #1 qualifier, with Thunderbolt actually being second place, and then Power Forward, just like it did in the 2012 season opener in New Orleans, would struggle in qualifying and ended up getting last place in qualifying. And the funny thing was, for Power Forward, it did not make it to the finals once in 2012 as a racing champion. Once. That is something unbelievable. Power Forward, as the defending racing champion, never once made it to a finals to defend its racing title. That is crazy. It was then time for the 2012 championship, as Power Forward, as the defending race champion, once again showed why it was a defending race champion, getting through round 1 and then actually beat the #1 qualifier Eruption to get into the quarterfinals, where it would meet its match as it got beaten by Crush and Run, just like how Nitro the previous year got beaten, as Crush and Run would make it to the semifinals. Eventually, the semifinals was set, Crush and Run versus Nitro to start off with, as this would become a huge rivalry, but in the end, Crush and Run would win it and make it to the championship for the first time ever. And on the other side of the bracket, it would be Mad Dog, who was having a massive turnaround of a season, going up against Outlaw, who has been to the semifinals now 4 straight years in a row, and this time was looking to make it to the finals after falling short last year. And it would do so, setting up the finals between Crush and Run and Outlaw. In the first ever finals in the reign too, Outlaw would hold on in the turn and would go on to win it, and win its 3rd title, its first racing title since 2012. Now, at the time, this was the biggest freestyle track ever made, as I was going to make it as intense as possible for the finale of MTWS. However, when we started off freestyle, the results were not good, mostly because of 2 things. One, the camera angles, which I had no idea how to make the camera angles really work at the time. I wasn't that skilled yet. But more importantly, the weather. And I had an epiphany at this moment, and that's when I decided for the rest of the show and for MTW to end it right off once and for all for MTWS, I would no longer have weather in my events. Now, the reason is because that week, the few weeks or so leading to the championship that I filmed, I'm not kidding, in Baltimore for the weather, we had everything. It was going to be sunny. Then it was supposed to rain with tornado warnings. Yeah, we had tornado warnings that week of January 2013 when I was filming the championship. And then snow and all. It was all over the place, the weather we had. And in the end, the day of the championship, I think it was sunny. So no rain, no tornadoes, snow, nothing. So that's why I decided, you know what? Why would I have weather in my event when it's not going to be the case most likely when the event actually happens? It's one thing when I did the non-live events and checked the weather right then. The weather there was consistently across the board, usually the same for the night. That show. But not this, where I'm filming like a week or so beforehand and the weather is just crazy and insane and end up not being the case. So that's why I decided I'm no longer going to have weather in MTWS. And that's why for the rest of the night, I had the camera angle behind the truck, as I still had no idea how to make camera angles at the time. But then after a while, Badass came out and stunned everyone by going for a monster truck, which I had as an obstacle on top of a flatbed, but more importantly, was the first one of the night to go for the triple and cleared it. With the incredible 5 bonus points it scored, it took the lead with a 32. Showing everyone tonight that if it's going to win a freestyle title, it's going to have to beat the score that it took last year. After a bunch of trucks tried to beat Badass, MTWS came out as one of the rookies and had an incredible run and would end up getting the first and only backflip of the night, the first ever backflip in the championship history. And with that incredible run, MTWS would tie Badass for the lead with several trucks still to go. A few more trucks went out, and then it was Impala going for the win and had an incredible run and had this crazy ass save, which I have no idea what it was until I show you all later when I put the videos up. It was an insane almost save, and it ended up getting a 32 as well. With just a few trucks remaining, we had a freeway tie with a 32 between Badass, MTWS, and Impala. And of course, I had the tiebreakers this time because there was not going to be no tiebreaker bullshit like the previous year. But it would not last, as Power Forward, who just lost its racing title, went out to make an incredible run at it to get a freestyle title, kind of like how Outlaw did just 2 years earlier when it lost its racing title and ended up winning the freestyle title. It put up an incredible run and ended up taking the lead with a 34 with just a few trucks remaining. But unfortunately for Power Forward, Nitro came out there wanting to get a freestyle title too and ended up putting up an incredible run and took the lead with a 36, which officially became the highest score in MTWS history in the championship, beating Outlaw's 35 when it won its freestyle title in 2010. It was down to a few trucks remaining. Crazy had a sick run, but flipped I think a little bit too early or something like that, and ended up falling 1 point short. Then Mad Dog came out and had a violent flip, but unfortunately fell short with a 34. It was down to 2 trucks remaining, and next up was Outlaw, looking to once again get revenge and beat Nitro like it did in 2010. It put up one incredible run, clearing the triple. I think hitting everything out there at full throttle and put up a sick run. It tried the backflip, but it failed, unfortunately. And Crazy did it. Ended up taking the lead with a 38. A 38. Just continuing to set that record higher and higher and higher. And with last up was the defending freestyle champion Thunderbolt, who was putting up a run. To challenge Outlaw for that defendant's title. But unfortunately, when it went for the triple, it had too much speed, couldn't slow down time, and ended up hitting one of the hills off the side, and ended up flipping over. I believe it was right before bonus time came in, and would fall short with a 34. Higher than it won its title in the previous year, but nowhere near enough to defend it, as Outlaw not only won its 4th title, its first freestyle title since 2010, but would get the double down, the first time ever in MTWS history in the championship, and still remains to stay the only one. What a finale for the championship for Outlaw to get the double down. Incredible. But to wrap up the finale of MTWS, I decided to have one giant encore the next day where all 40 trucks in MTWS, in order of how much they scored from least to highest, would go out for one giant encore to wrap it up, as I thought that would be the only way I could commemorate the championship. And with that, it was all over. That moment that I came to back in November of 2011 finally hit. MTWS, not only was the 2012 season over, but MTWS was done. It was done. All that work finally done. MTWS, no more as a series. That's what I thought back in 2013 when I ended it. But I would not know, just a year or so later, that would change. But that's a story for another time, as that will wrap up this episode right here. Oh my god, this is a long-ass episode too. This might be the longest one too. So I hope you all enjoyed hearing about the backstory of the 2012 MTWS season and how it ended up almost being the last series of MTWS. But next episode won't be that long, but tune in for episode 7, where I talk about the 2013 season where MTWS would come back as an exhibition league. See you guys then.